If a multi-tool is going to be worth buying, it's going to need a good saw, if you ask me. Today, we're going to be comparing the saws on a handful of Leatherman multi-tools and seeing how they do against each other and against this dead, fallen limb. At some point, we might even compare them to this. Stick around, should be fun. Hey guys, Late Boy Scout here, and as I mentioned in the intro, we're comparing Leatherman saws today. Let's start from left to right. We've got the Super Tool 300 and its saw. We've got the s.o.g and the saw that it came with. We've got the Black Blast and its saw out, ready to go. The Leatherman Wave, of course, is with us. And lastly, the Juice KF4. Now let's start back from left to right and talk about the saws. The KF4 saw is going to be the same one that you'll find on a couple of other Juice models. Those being the XE6 and the CS4, if I'm not mistaken. Now this is actually a pretty capable saw for its size. Let's compare it in length, in teeth length, to the Wave. You can see that the amount of teeth it has is nearly identical to the Wave, which means you should get about the same performance from it. Then to the Blast, once again, the amount of teeth is very close, maybe even superior to that of the Blast. And given the fact that the Blast has the saw up here, kind of occluding the amount of work that you can get done, you may actually have less usable area on that saw. Then we come to the s.o.g. This Juice actually has, it appears to be, is it more teeth? It's very close. Almost the same amount of teeth as the s.o.g. So we're looking at probably the same performance there. Then the Super Tool 300. What we're looking at, yeah, nearly the same amount of teeth. A little bit more on the Super Tool. So we may get better performance from the Super Tool, but once again, we've got the fact that the saw is up here, which, as it interacts with the branch, could sort of occlude some of these teeth and limit its usefulness. Let's come to the Wave now, which we've already compared with the Juice. It looks like the Wave and the Blast have about the same amount of teeth going on. So I expect very, very similar performance. When you compare it to the s.o.g here, the s.o.g saw appears to be shorter, but the amount of teeth it has are really almost identical to that of the Wave. Possibly one or two more on the Wave, but it's hard to tell. Then we bring it to the Super Tool 300, and it looks like, once again, the Super Tool has more teeth, but again, that problem. If we come to the Blast and compare it to the s.o.g, it looks like the Blast has got a longer saw, but because of that occlusion right here, maybe less usefulness. But if we just compare the teeth alone, we're just about the same. So the performance, we'll see how it compares. Then we compare the s.o.g to the Super Tool. Well, the Super Tool wins by a lot as far as simple teeth count. But once again, that potential occlusion there and interacting with your branch may give the s.o.g possibly the upper hand, but I would say it's probably going to be on par in performance with the Super Tool. Well, that's a comparison of the saws. Now let's see how they compare in doing some cutting. Let's start with this intersection of branches right here. We've got a branch that's approximately, let's see, 5/8 of an inch in diameter, something like that. We'll start with the Super Tool 300 and just see how it does against this little bit of branch. Sorry for the noise of those dry leaves, but we want to get some work done on this semi-green tree here, because I think this simulates what you're going to be working on in a survival situation. Now let's try the Leatherman s.o.g against this same piece. That slightly shorter saw, saw that kind of come out of there at one time. I think I was expecting sort of the same length, but obviously didn't have it. Now here's the blast. Okay. I wonder if that black oxide is causing more friction there. Hard to say, but it looks like it left a little bit of residue on the actual branch. Now on to the wave. KF4, one of the easiest ones to carry at just maybe 5 ounces, if that. Great little tool. Let's see how the saw does. Wow. I feel like that performed really well for its size. I like that KF4. Again, this saw is going to also be available on those 2 juice bottles that I talked about earlier. Now let's see what a real folding saw will do. This saw is made by Bahco, and it's a nice folding backpacking saw, very lightweight, about as heavy as probably one of the heavier of these tools. The Super Tool, maybe even the Wave. Very, very close in weight, but far more capable as far as just the saw is concerned. Obviously it doesn't have any of those other tools on it, but it's a dedicated saw. So let's see how it does against this same branch in comparison to those other tools. Pretty much showed them all who's boss. Moving down the branch a little ways, we're now going to do some cutting on this piece of the branch that's about 1 1/8 of an inch wide, starting with the Super Tool 300. Winding up a little bit there. And even more so now. Let's lift that branch and open it up a little bit to make it easier. Not much easier. Okay. Could have stopped and broken that off much sooner, but the point was to test the saw. Now on to the s.o.g. Let's see how it does against this same diameter of branch. Alright, got that done. And now let's give the blast a go against this. Once again, it's about 1 1/8 of an inch. Kind of hard to keep it in there. Well, it took some work, but got through that. Once again, seems to be leaving some of that blackness from the blade on the branch, and possibly gumming up that saw a bit. Those teeth are not very big, so you get full of that sawdust, and that probably slows it down as it's cutting. That's happening both to the s.o.g here as well as to the Super Tool 300. So it's just going to be what you get, I think, with a multi-tool saw. Here comes the Leatherman wave against that same branch. Go below these little branches here. Well, that was not too bad. Once again, gumming up a little bit some of those fibers and dust from sawing through that. Now the KF4. Oh, wow. That saw moves surprisingly fast through that branch for its size. Once again, I'll compare it to the Super Tool saw. For its size and just the weight and smallness of this tool, whatever I don't know why, but that saw is just tearing through stuff a lot faster. Really cool. And once again, to show everybody who's boss, here comes the Bahco folding saw. Now here's a branch. It's about 1 5/8 inch in diameter as I measure it with my Super Tool. This is a branch that is kind of on the borderline of what I think is reasonable for these saws. So let's see how they do against it. And we'll break off that last little bit there. So you see diameter wise how that saw compares to the branch, and that's why I mean that I think this is on the borderline of what's reasonable for a saw this size. Let's move on to the s.o.g, see how it does against this. Turn the camera just a little bit. I think what I need to do is clear these teeth out halfway through or part of the way through in order to get some aggressiveness back into that saw. Whew. keep doing that. Again, getting that thing cleared out. Might even try to turn this over at this point. And we're almost, yeah, there we are. Just had that tiny bit left to go. Again, comparison of the diameter of the branch versus the length of the saw. That's getting difficult, so what I think I'm going to do is return to this branch and use that for the next cut test. And this one is the wave. Let's see how it does. Oof, it's getting real difficult. I have to get my foot down on this thing. There we go. Let's remove some of that sawdust before I continue. There we are. And it's got quite a bit of dust in it after that. Just doesn't pull it out very well. Let's move on to the black blast. Try and get those teeth clear before I get started. Hot day, and I'm dripping sweat on the log. Alright, let's get some of that out of there. You know, one thing you can do with the blast, and even the super tool, to avoid that occlusion is just open it like this. We'll see how that does. Once again, get that cleared out. I wanted to get it working again. and we're through. So there's an example of the diameter of that branch versus the length of the saw. And once again, you appear to be leaving bits of that black oxide finish on the branch, possibly slowing this one down. I gotta tell you though, with tools like the Blast, probably the Super Tool as well, opening it up and using it in this configuration is probably going to be easier, especially if you want to grasp it two-handed and manipulate it like this. The Juice KF4 has been doing a better job than most of them. Can't really explain why. Let's see if it maintains that for this run. Let's get some of that gunk out of there. Let's see, nearly there. And there you are. That again is the Juice KF4, sporting the saw that two other Juice models have. And one more time to show us all who's boss, here comes that Bahco folding saw. Well, that concludes our Leatherman saws test today. Once again, the models we had were the Juice KF4, and the saw on it represents any of the other Juice models that have a saw. The Blast, right here, and the stainless Blast would be pretty comparable, I'd say. I'm wondering if the black oxide on this one slowed it down a little bit, gave it some more friction. It's hard to say that for sure. The Wave and the saw on this will represent any of those on the Charge series as well. The Super Tool 300. Now that's probably the longest of the saws, but not necessarily the most effective. And the Leatherman s.o.g with its saw, which actually comes out and can be replaced. Now, there are probably a couple of Leatherman saws here not represented. One of those would be the Leatherman Wingman, but I feel like it's pretty comparable to either the Juice or the Wave, possibly the Blast, as far as the length of it and the usefulness of it. So, if you had to choose which of these Leatherman saws you would go with, which one would it be? Well, I know which saw I'd rather have. This one right here. Yeah, for a backpacking situation, survival situation, I'd rather have a nice folding saw like this with a good 7 or so inch blade. That really tears through things pretty quickly. These saws, you're definitely undergunned, but if it's all you got, you might be able to get the job done. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I'm the Late Boy Scout with this Leatherman saws comparison. We'll see you on the next one.